The strange thing about miracles is that sometimes they arrive years late, wrapped in an envelope you never asked for. The rain tapped softly against the classroom windows as I stacked construction paper and dried markers into plastic bins. It was almost 6 in the evening. Every other teacher had gone home nearly an hour ago, but I stayed behind like I always did. The silence after a school day felt peaceful to me. Maybe because kids filled every corner of the room with life, while adults often filled rooms with expectations. I switched off the last row of lights and grabbed my coat from the back of my chair. The hallway smelled faintly of floor wax and old books. Outside, October had painted Boston in shades of gold and copper. The air carried that sharp chill that reminded you winter was coming. I was halfway across the parking lot when my phone buzzed. A text from my landlord. Rent reminder. Due tomorrow. I stared at the screen for a moment and released a slow breath. Teaching 3rd grade wasn't exactly a path to luxury. Still, I loved my job. Most days, that felt like enough. Most days. By the time I reached my apartment building, the sky had darkened into deep blue. My apartment sat on the 3rd floor above a small bakery. The scent of fresh bread drifted through the stairwell every evening. It was one of my favorite things about living there. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and kicked off my shoes. The apartment was tiny. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, furniture that didn't match, plants that somehow survived despite my terrible memory for watering them. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I set my bag on the kitchen counter and noticed something immediately. An envelope. Thick, white, perfectly centered on the table. My stomach tightened. I hadn't left it there. There was no stamp, no return address, nothing except my name written neatly across the front. Grace Carter. I looked around the apartment, even though I knew nobody was there. Then I picked it up. The paper felt expensive, heavier than normal stationery. Inside was a single folded note and a cashier's check. My breath caught. $100,000. I blinked, then blinked again. The number didn't change. My fingers trembled as I unfolded the note. The handwriting matched the envelope. Clean, precise, almost elegant. The message was short. For the little girl you helped 5 years ago. That's all it said. No signature, no explanation, no contact information. Just one sentence. I sat down slowly at the kitchen table. 5 years ago. My mind searched through hundreds of memories. Thousands of children, thousands of parents, birthday parties, school events, volunteer programs, hospital visits, lost backpacks, scraped knees, tears, smiles. 5 years ago could have been yesterday and a lifetime ago at the same time. I read the note again, then again. For the little girl you helped 5 years ago. Somewhere deep in the back of my mind, something stirred. A rainy afternoon, flashing lights, a frightened child, small hands gripping mine. But the memory refused to come fully into focus. I stared at the check lying on the table under the warm kitchen light. $100,000. Enough to pay off every debt I had. Enough to change my life. Yet all I could think about was one question. Who had sent it? And why did I suddenly feel like someone had been watching me for a very long time? The next morning, I woke up hoping the envelope had been a dream. The kind that feels real until sunlight exposes every impossible detail. But the moment I stepped into the kitchen, it was still there. The white envelope sat exactly where I had left it. The cashier's check rested beside it like proof that reality could sometimes be stranger than fiction. I poured myself coffee and stared at the note again. For the little girl you helped 5 years ago. I must have read those words 50 times before leaving for work. The memory still would not come. At school, the usual chaos swallowed most of my attention. Backpacks dropped onto desks. Children arguing over crayons. Questions fired at me faster than I could answer them. Normally, the energy made me smile. Today, my mind kept drifting back to the envelope. During lunch break, I finally showed the note to my best friend, Lily. She taught 4th grade across the hall and possessed the rare talent of turning every situation into either a comedy or a disaster. Usually both. She stared at the check, then at me, then back at the check. Grace, this is $100,000. I noticed. Do you have any rich secret admirers? I laughed despite myself. If I did, they're doing a terrible job introducing themselves. Lily lowered her voice dramatically. Maybe it is a billionaire. I rolled my eyes. And maybe I am secretly a princess. She pointed at the check. One of those sounds more believable than the other. By the end of the day, I still had no answers. Only more questions. Across the city, hundreds of miles away from my tiny classroom, another morning was unfolding very differently. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan. Sunlight reflected off glass towers and polished steel. The office occupied the top floor of Blackwood Tower. Everything about it projected power without needing to announce it. Ethan Blackwood stood beside the windows with a cup of untouched coffee. His attention was fixed on a screen displaying a live security feed. Not of a bank, not of a company acquisition, not of a business rival. A school hallway. Children rushed past in colorful jackets. Teachers carried stacks of papers. Then Grace Carter appeared. She laughed at something one of her students said. The sound was absent from the silent footage, but Ethan knew exactly what the laugh sounded like. He had watched enough recordings over the years. Behind him, a man cleared his throat carefully. Nathan Reynolds had worked as Ethan's chief advisor for nearly a decade. He understood two important rules. Never waste Ethan's time, and never ask questions you did not want answered. The delivery was completed yesterday, Nathan said. Ethan nodded without turning around. Did she cash it? Not yet. A faint smile touched Ethan's face. Not because he was disappointed. Quite the opposite. I did not think she would. Nathan hesitated. 5 years is a long time. Ethan finally looked away from the screen. His green eyes reflected the city skyline behind the glass. Not long enough. Nathan recognized that tone. The conversation was over. Yet even after he left the office, Ethan remained standing there. Watching. Remembering. 5 years earlier, everything had almost changed forever because of one terrified little girl standing alone in the rain, and one young woman who stopped walking when everyone else kept going. Ethan glanced at another photograph lying on his desk. It showed a smiling child holding a stuffed rabbit. Beside her stood Grace Carter. Neither of them knew someone had captured that moment. Neither of them knew that one small act of kindness had quietly altered the course of more than one life. Ethan picked up the photograph. For the first time in years, something that looked suspiciously like anticipation crossed his face. Because sooner or later, Grace Carter was going to remember. Memory is a strange thing. The harder you chase it, the faster it runs. 3 days passed, and I still could not remember the little girl from the note. The envelope remained hidden inside my kitchen drawer, tucked beneath old utility bills and takeout menus, as if hiding it could somehow make it less real. It did not. Every morning I thought about it. Every night I wondered who had sent it. By Friday afternoon, a cold drizzle settled over Boston, the kind that turned sidewalks silver and filled the air with the smell of wet pavement. School had just ended when one of my students, Olivia, tugged gently on my sleeve. "Miss Carter," she asked, "are you okay?" I blinked. "Of course. What?" "You keep staring out the window." I smiled. Children noticed everything. "Just thinking." She nodded seriously. "My grandma says thinking too much gives you wrinkles." I laughed, and the sound felt good. Genuine. For the first time all week. After the students left, I stayed behind to finish grading spelling tests. Outside, rain tapped against the glass. Inside, the classroom felt warm and quiet. Then my eyes drifted toward the bulletin board near the reading corner. A photograph hung there among dozens of others. Community Day. 5 years ago. My stomach tightened. I stood slowly and walked closer. The picture showed a crowded city park during a charity event. Children painting faces. Families eating hot dogs. Volunteers helping visitors. And there, near the edge of the frame, stood me. Younger. Smiling. Holding the hand of a little girl with blonde hair and a stuffed rabbit tucked beneath her arm. My breath caught. Suddenly, the memory returned. Not all at once. Piece by piece. Like sunlight breaking through heavy clouds. It had been raining that day, too. The event was ending when I noticed the little girl standing alone near a parking lot entrance. She could not have been older than 6. She looked terrified. Tears streamed down her face, while people hurried past without noticing. I remembered kneeling beside her, asking her name. Emily. That was it. Emily. She had become separated from her family. I stayed with her for nearly 2 hours. We played simple games. Counted cars. Shared a pretzel. I even gave her my umbrella because she refused to stop worrying about her stuffed rabbit getting wet. Eventually, security located her family. I remembered the relief on her face. The way she threw her arms around me before running toward a black SUV waiting nearby. Then another memory surfaced. A man stepping out of the vehicle. Tall. Impossibly well-dressed. Green eyes. He arrived moments after everything was resolved. Security spoke with him briefly. He looked exhausted, worried, relieved. I never learned his name. We exchanged maybe 10 words. Thank you. That was what he had said. Just 2 simple words. Yet somehow I remembered them now. The sincerity behind them. The gratitude. I stared at the photograph. My pulse quickened. Across the country, on the 58th floor of Blackwood Tower, Ethan Blackwood sat alone in his office when his phone vibrated. A single message appeared from a private investigator. Subject: viewed community event photograph today. Ethan read the message once, then set the phone down. Slowly, a smile appeared. Not the polished smile the business world knew. Something quieter, more personal. Because after 5 years, Grace Carter had finally remembered Emily. And Ethan knew that everything was about to change. Some people enter your life with a knock on the door. Others arrive through a memory you thought you had forgotten. The following Monday began like any other. My alarm rang at 6. I burned a piece of toast while checking student assignments. I rushed out the door carrying too many folders and not enough coffee. Yet something felt different. The photograph from the bulletin board stayed in my mind all weekend. So did Emily. So did the man with the green eyes standing beside the black SUV. I had spent hours searching online. Emily. A black SUV. A charity event from 5 years ago. It was impossible. Thousands of families attended events like that every year. I had almost given up when Lily burst into my classroom before the first bell. She was holding her phone and wearing the expression she reserved for celebrity gossip and educational emergencies. "Grace," she said, "tell me this is not him." She shoved the screen toward me. A business magazine article filled the display. The headline featured a photograph of a man standing in front of a Manhattan skyscraper. My heart skipped. Green eyes, dark hair, sharp suit. The same man from the parking lot 5 years ago. Ethan Blackwood, founder and chief executive officer of Blackwood Capital. Estimated net worth, several $billion. I stared at the article longer than I intended. "You know him?" Lily asked. "No." I swallowed. "At least, I do not think so." Throughout the day, the image stayed with me. The wealth, the power, the impossible distance between his world and mine. By the time school ended, I had convinced myself the connection was meaningless. Then I returned home. A Blacktown car was parked across the street. I noticed it immediately because nothing about it fit the neighborhood. The vehicle looked polished enough to belong outside a luxury hotel. A man in a dark suit stood beside the passenger door. For a moment, I wondered if he had the wrong address. Then he stepped forward. "Miss Carter." My stomach tightened. "Yes." He offered a polite smile. "My name is Nathan Reynolds. I work for Mr. Ethan Blackwood." The city noise seemed to fade around me. Cars passed. A dog barked somewhere down the block. Yet all I could hear was Ethan Blackwood's name. Nathan extended a small envelope. "Mr. Blackwood asked me to deliver this personally." I accepted it carefully. The paper felt expensive, just like the first envelope. "What is this?" I asked. Nathan's expression softened slightly. "An invitation." Before I could ask another question, he nodded politely and returned to the car. The vehicle pulled away moments later, disappearing into evening traffic. I stood frozen on the sidewalk. Then I opened the envelope. Inside was a single card. The message was short. "Miss Carter, 5 years ago you helped someone very important to me. I would like the opportunity to thank you properly. Dinner. Thursday evening. Manhattan. Transportation provided. Ethan Blackwood." I read the note twice. Then a third time. My pulse quickened. Because for the first time since the mysterious check appeared, the invisible person behind everything suddenly had a face. And somehow, that made the situation feel far more dangerous than before. The invitation sat on my kitchen table for 2 days before I finally made a decision. Every time I walked past it, I felt the same mixture of curiosity and unease. Ethan Blackwood was not simply wealthy. He belonged to a world that existed on magazine covers and financial news networks. A world that had nothing to do with crowded classrooms, overdue rent reminders, or discount grocery stores. By Thursday afternoon, I had already decided I was not going. Then Lily called. "You are absolutely going." I balanced my phone between my shoulder and ear while grading math worksheets. "No, I am absolutely not. Grace, a billionaire, personally invited you to dinner. That is exactly why I am not going." Lily sighed dramatically. "Do you honestly think he is going to kidnap a third-grade teacher?" "That is not what I am worried about." "Then what are you worried about?" I looked around the empty classroom. The answer came more easily than I expected. I do not belong there. Silence lingered for a moment. Then Lily's voice softened. Maybe he is the one who does not belong in your world. That thought followed me all afternoon. By 6 o'clock, I found myself standing in front of my bedroom mirror. Not because I had decided to attend. At least that was what I kept telling myself. Yet somehow I had changed clothes 3 times. At exactly 7, headlights appeared outside my apartment building. A black town car waited at the curb. I stared through the window. My pulse quickened. Then I did something completely unexpected. I picked up the invitation, walked downstairs, and stepped outside. The driver opened the rear door without saying a word. The ride to the airport took 20 minutes. The ride from Boston to Manhattan took less than an hour aboard a private jet that felt larger than my entire apartment. Everything about the experience seemed unreal. The leather seats, the polished wood, the silence. By the time we landed, I was more certain than ever that I should turn around and go home. Instead, another car carried me through Manhattan's glowing streets. Towers of glass reflected thousands of lights against the night sky. People hurried along crowded sidewalks. The city felt alive, powerful, endless. Finally, the car stopped in front of a rooftop restaurant overlooking Central Park. The view alone probably cost more than my yearly salary. A hostess greeted me immediately. "Miss Carter, Mr. Blackwood is waiting." My heart pounded as I followed her through the dining room. Conversations blended with soft piano music. Crystal glasses reflected golden light. Then I saw him. Ethan Blackwood stood beside the window overlooking the city. He wore a dark suit without a tie. One hand rested casually in his pocket. The other held a glass of water. When he turned toward me, I recognized him instantly. Not from a magazine article. From 5 years ago. The same green eyes. The same quiet intensity. Yet something about him seemed different from the image the media projected. More human. More tired. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then Ethan smiled. Not a practiced corporate smile. A genuine one. "Hello, Grace." His voice was calm. Familiar somehow. "Thank you for coming." I opened my mouth to respond. Instead, the first question escaped before I could stop it. "Why did you send me $100,000? Ethan's smile faded slightly. He looked out across the city lights before meeting my eyes again. "Because no amount of money could repay what you did for Emily." Then he paused, and what he said next made my entire world stop. "She is my little sister." For a moment, I forgot about the city lights beyond the glass. I forgot about the restaurant, the private jet, the impossible distance between our worlds. All I could think about was a little girl standing in the rain with a stuffed rabbit pressed against her chest. "Emily is your sister?" I asked quietly. Ethan nodded. Something softened in his expression at the mention of her name. She was 6 at the time. I looked down at the table. She was scared. She had wandered away from security during the event. A faint smile appeared on his face. My family spent nearly 2 hours searching for her. I remembered the panic in Emily's eyes. The way she had refused to let go of my hand until someone she trusted arrived. She was very brave. Ethan looked out at the city for a second before answering. "She talks about you every year." I blinked. "What? Every year on the anniversary of that day?" His voice remained calm, but there was something genuine underneath it. "She remembers the teacher who stayed when everyone else was too busy to notice a frightened little girl." Heat crept into my cheeks. I did not do anything special. Ethan laughed softly. The sound surprised me. It was warm. Unexpected. "You keep saying that." "Because it is true." "No, Grace." His eyes met mine. "It is not." The waiter arrived with dinner, giving me a moment to breathe. Once we were alone again, Ethan reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and removed a photograph. He slid it across the table. My heart tightened the moment I saw it. Emily stood in front of a birthday cake. She looked older now, maybe 11. Her smile filled the entire picture. In her hands was the same stuffed rabbit from years ago. "She still has it," I whispered. Ethan nodded. "She refused to replace it." I studied the photograph. There was happiness in Emily's eyes, the kind that could not be bought. "How is she?" I asked. "Healthy, happy, stubborn." A genuine smile appeared again. "Very stubborn." "That sounds familiar." He raised an eyebrow. "You have known her for 2 hours. Some personalities reveal themselves quickly." Ethan laughed again, this time longer. For some reason, that simple sound felt more valuable than everything surrounding us. More valuable than the view. More valuable than the luxury. As the evening continued, we talked. Not about money, not about business. We talked about Emily, about teaching, about books, about childhood memories. The conversation felt strangely easy. Yet one question continued to linger in the back of my mind. Finally, I asked it. Why now? Ethan's expression changed slightly. What do you mean? 5 years passed. I folded my hands together. If you wanted to thank me, why wait so long? Silence settled between us. Not uncomfortable, just thoughtful. Ethan looked down at his glass before answering. Because 5 years ago, I thought money was the answer to everything. His voice had become quieter, more honest. Then I watched Emily grow up. I waited. And every time she talked about you, she never mentioned what you gave her. I did not give her anything. Exactly. His eyes lifted to mine. You gave her your time, your patience, your kindness. The one thing nobody can buy. The city shimmered beyond the windows. Thousands of lights. Thousands of stories. Yet somehow the world felt smaller than before. More personal. Then Ethan reached into his pocket again and placed a second envelope on the table. My stomach immediately tightened. What is this? I asked. Ethan smiled. Before you panic, it is not another check. That should have made me feel better. Somehow it did not. Because the look in his eyes told me whatever was inside might change everything all over again. The second envelope felt surprisingly light in my hands. For some reason, that made me even more nervous. Ethan sat quietly across from me while the city glowed beyond the windows. He was not watching the skyline anymore. He was watching me, waiting. I carefully opened the envelope and pulled out a single folded sheet of paper. At first, I thought it was a letter. Then I realized it was a brochure. My eyes moved across photographs of classrooms, playgrounds, libraries, and smiling children. The heading at the top read Carter Community Learning Center. I frowned. What is this? Ethan leaned back slightly. A project. I looked at him. Why does it have my name on it? Because it was inspired by you. I stared at the page again. The proposal outlined a new educational center for underserved children, after-school tutoring, literacy programs, arts education, family support services, everything a struggling community might need. The budget alone was larger than anything I had ever imagined. Ethan, I looked up slowly. This cannot be real. It is very real. I set the brochure down. You named an entire project after me? A small smile touched the corner of his mouth. Actually, Emily named it. That answer caught me off guard. What? She said the woman who helped her deserved something good to exist in the world. For a moment, I could not speak. The restaurant noise seemed distant. The city lights blurred slightly. I blinked and looked away before emotion could show too clearly on my face. That is incredibly kind, I said quietly. But you should not have done this. Ethan studied me carefully. Why? I laughed softly in disbelief. Because you do not build a community center for someone you barely know. Maybe. His voice remained calm. Or maybe you build one because the person who inspired it would never ask for it herself. I looked back down at the proposal. The truth was obvious. This center could help hundreds of children, maybe thousands over time. Yet something about it still felt wrong. Not because the project was bad, because it was too much. You keep trying to repay me, I said. Grace, I am trying to honor what you did. I shook my head gently. No, you are trying to measure kindness. Silence settled between us. Ethan's expression changed slightly. Not defensive, thoughtful. What does that mean? I folded the brochure closed. You keep attaching numbers to things. His eyebrows lifted. Numbers. The check. This project. The flights. The cars. I met his eyes. You are treating gratitude like a business transaction. For the first time all evening, Ethan had no immediate response. The pause lasted only a few seconds, but it felt important. And what should I do instead? He asked quietly. I smiled. Say thank you. He stared at me. Then something unexpected happened. Ethan Blackwood laughed. Not politely. Not professionally. A real laugh. Warm and genuine. The kind that transformed his entire face. When the laughter faded, he shook his head. Do you know something, Grace? What? You might be the first person in 10 years who has told me no. I smiled back. Then maybe you should start listening when I do. And for the first time that night, Ethan looked less like one of the most powerful men in America and more like someone discovering there were things money could never buy. When the dinner finally ended, I expected the evening to feel finished. Instead, it felt like the beginning of something I could not quite name. The drive back to the airport was quieter than the ride into Manhattan. The city lights slid across the window like reflections on water. Beside me, Ethan reviewed messages on his phone, but every few minutes I caught him looking up, watching the city, thinking. "You are very quiet," he said eventually. I smiled. "I think I am still processing the fact that my evening included a private jet." A faint grin appeared. "Fair point. And a community center with my name on it." "That too." I shook my head. "You really do not hear the word no very often, do you?" Ethan actually looked embarrassed. The expression seemed so out of place on someone like him that I nearly laughed. "Probably not as often as I should." "That explains a lot." He chuckled softly. The sound lingered between us. Comfortable. Easy. Somehow the conversation no longer felt like two strangers sitting together. By the time we reached Boston, the clock had passed midnight. Cold air greeted us as we stepped onto the tarmac. I pulled my coat tighter around myself. "Thank you for dinner," I said. "You are welcome." Ethan paused. "And thank you for coming." The sincerity in his voice surprised me. Most powerful people seemed accustomed to being thanked. Ethan sounded genuinely grateful. Before I could respond, another voice interrupted from behind us. "Grace." I turned. A young girl with blonde hair came running across the private terminal lobby. She could not have been older than 11. Her stuffed rabbit was tucked tightly beneath one arm. My breath caught instantly. "Emily." She stopped a few feet away and stared at me with wide blue eyes. Then she smiled. The same smile from the photograph. The same smile from 5 years ago. "It is really you." Before I could say anything, she wrapped her arms around me. I hugged her back automatically. The rabbit pressed between us. "Hi, Emily." Her eyes widened. "You remembered." I did. She looked delighted. Ethan watched the exchange from a short distance away. There was pride in his expression. Relief too. As if this moment mattered more than he wanted anyone to know. Emily talked for almost 15 straight minutes. About school. About soccer. About books she loved. About how she still kept the umbrella I gave her years ago. "It is broken now," she admitted. "But I kept it anyway." My heart squeezed. "Why?" She shrugged as though the answer were obvious. "Because it reminds me that good people exist." Silence followed. Not awkward silence. The kind that settles when a simple truth lands exactly where it should. Ethan looked away briefly. Toward the airport windows. Toward the darkness beyond them. Then back at us. And for the first time since I had met him, I noticed something unexpected in his eyes. Not confidence. Not control. Hope. The following week should have returned to normal. Instead, normal seemed to disappear entirely. Every morning, I walked into my classroom expecting to focus on lesson plans and spelling quizzes. Every afternoon, I found myself thinking about conversations in airport terminals and rooftop restaurants. It was ridiculous. Ethan Blackwood lived in a world completely separate from mine. Yet somehow that world kept finding ways to appear in unexpected places. On Tuesday, a package arrived at the school office. My name was written neatly across the front. Immediately, I became suspicious. The receptionist handed it to me with a grin. "You have mysterious admirers now." I carried the box back to my classroom and opened it carefully. Inside was a stack of children's books. Not expensive gifts. Not luxury items. Just books. Dozens of them. Every title focused on literacy, imagination, and confidence. A small note rested on top. "For the students. Not for you, Ethan." I stared at the message. Then I laughed. He had listened. Later that afternoon, my students crowded around the new books with excitement. Olivia hugged 3 of them against her chest like treasure. Watching their reactions filled me with a warmth that no check ever could. That evening my phone buzzed while I was grading assignments on my couch. An unfamiliar number appeared on the screen. I hesitated before answering. "Hello. I would like credit for showing remarkable restraint." Ethan's voice carried a trace of amusement. I smiled before I could stop myself. The books were a nice gesture. I wanted to send a library. That does not surprise me. He laughed softly. "Emily told me you would say that." The mention of his sister immediately brightened my mood. "How is she?" "Currently convincing everyone in the house that a rabbit needs its own birthday celebration." "The stuffed rabbit?" "The very same." I laughed. "I support this idea completely. That makes one of us." The conversation continued far longer than I expected. We talked about books, students, favorite childhood memories, and the strange things children believed with absolute confidence. At some point, I stopped noticing how different our lives were. He was simply Ethan. The man who worried about his sister. The man who laughed more than magazine articles suggested. The man learning that not every problem required money. The next morning, everything changed. I arrived at school to find teachers gathered around the front office television. Their expressions were unusually serious. A financial news channel filled the screen. Ethan's photograph appeared beside a headline scrolling across the bottom. Market controversy surrounds Blackwood Capital. Reporters discussed accusations, investigations, and criticism aimed at his company. I stood frozen. The details blurred together. The only thing I understood was that something had happened. Something significant. Lily noticed my expression immediately. "You know him?" It was not a question. I looked back at the screen. Ethan's image remained there. Calm, controlled, unreadable. Yet for the first time since meeting him, I wondered if I truly knew anything about the man behind that face at all. The rest of the day felt strangely heavy. Every time I glanced at my phone, I saw Ethan's name in my recent calls. Every time I looked at the television screen in the teacher's lounge, I saw headlines questioning decisions made by Blackwood Capital. By the time I returned home that evening, rain had started falling again. Soft at first, then steady. I sat on my couch with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders and opened article after article. Some painted Ethan as a visionary. Others described him as ruthless. A few accused his company of forcing struggling neighborhoods to change faster than residents could keep up. None of the reports agreed completely, yet all of them shared one thing. Ethan's name stood at the center of every story. Around 8 o'clock, my phone rang. His name appeared on the screen. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. Instead, I answered. "Hello." Silence lingered for half a second. "You saw the news." It was not a question. I looked toward the rain-streaked window. "Yes." Another pause. "And?" I hated how difficult that simple question felt. "I do not know what to think." His voice remained calm. "Fair answer." I expected him to defend himself immediately, to explain, to argue. Instead, he simply waited. That somehow made everything harder. "Are the stories true?" I finally asked. Ethan exhaled slowly. "Some of them." My stomach tightened. "Which ones?" "The parts where people were angry." I frowned. That is not really an answer. A quiet laugh escaped him. Not amused. Tired. "No, it is not." Rain tapped against my window. Somewhere in the distance, a siren echoed through the city streets. "Then tell me the truth," I said. This time the silence lasted longer. When he spoke again, his voice sounded different. Less controlled. More honest. 10 years ago, I believed success solved everything. I listened. If a building was old, replace it. If a business failed, buy it. If a neighborhood struggled, invest money and move forward. He paused. I thought growth automatically meant improvement. I closed my eyes. Suddenly I understood. And it did not. Not always. His answer came quietly. Some people benefited. Some people did not. The honesty surprised me. Most powerful people spent their lives protecting their image. Ethan sounded like someone examining old mistakes. "Do you regret it?" I asked. Another pause. "Every day." The answer landed harder than I expected. Not because it was dramatic. Because it sounded real. We talked for nearly an hour. Not about business reports or financial headlines. About consequences. About intentions. About how good ideas sometimes create painful outcomes. When the conversation ended, I sat in silence for several minutes. My phone rested in my lap. Outside, rain continued falling against the glass. Ethan was not the perfect man magazine cover suggested. He had made mistakes. Real ones. Significant ones. Yet the more I learned about him, the less interested I became in the billionaire the world saw. Because somewhere beneath the headlines was the man who remembered a teacher's kindness for 5 years. The man who adored his little sister. The man who was trying to become better than he used to be. And somehow, that realization frightened me far more than any newspaper article ever could. Sometimes the hardest thing about caring for someone is realizing they are still becoming the person they want to be. Over the next few weeks, life settled into a strange rhythm. Ethan and I spoke often. Sometimes it was a 5-minute conversation between meetings and lesson plans. Sometimes it was an hour-long discussion about books, childhood memories, or whatever ridiculous adventure Emily had created that week. Yet despite the growing connection between us, something had changed after our conversation about the news reports. A weight lingered beneath everything. Not because I doubted Ethan's sincerity, because I understood that change was not the same thing as redemption. One Friday afternoon, I stayed late helping prepare decorations for the school's winter fundraiser. Construction paper covered nearly every available surface. Glitter somehow managed to appear on everything, including me. My phone buzzed while I was hanging student artwork in the hallway. A message from Ethan. "Can I call?" I smiled before typing my reply. A few seconds later, his voice filled my ear. "How much glitter have you survived today?" I laughed. "Enough to qualify as a health hazard." "That sounds serious." "It is. I may never be glitter-free again." His laughter echoed softly through the phone. For a moment, everything felt easy again. Then he mentioned something that made my smile disappear. The board approved the redevelopment proposal. I stopped walking. "The one from the news?" Silence answered before words did. "Yes." I leaned against the hallway wall. "And you supported it?" Ethan exhaled slowly. "After months of revisions, community meetings, and changes, yes." I closed my eyes. "Some people are still against it." "I know. And you moved forward anyway." Another pause. "Grace, sometimes every option disappoints someone." I understood the logic. That was the problem. I understood it too well. Yet something inside me still resisted. "I think we see the world differently," I said quietly. His voice softened. "Maybe." The conversation ended politely, kindly. But afterward, I sat alone in the empty hallway staring at colorful paper snowflakes hanging from the ceiling. The distance between our worlds suddenly felt larger than ever. Over the following days, I answered fewer calls, returned fewer messages. Not intentionally at first, then intentionally. Every conversation left me feeling conflicted. Ethan was trying to do better. I believed that. But believing in someone was not the same as agreeing with them. One evening, Emily called unexpectedly. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked immediately. My heart broke a little. "No, sweetheart. Why would you think that?" "Because you have not talked to Ethan much." Children noticed everything. Just like Olivia. Sometimes adults need time to think. Emily grew quiet. "He misses talking to you." I swallowed hard. After the call ended, I stood by my apartment window watching snow drift through the darkness. Across hundreds of miles, a man who could command boardrooms, investors, and entire industries sat alone in a Manhattan office. And for the first time in a very long time, Ethan Blackwood was discovering that some things could not be solved with intelligence, determination, or money. Some things could only be lost. Winter arrived quietly. Snow gathered along sidewalks, coated school rooftops, and softened the sharp edges of the city. Life moved forward whether hearts were ready or not. Weeks turned into months. Then months turned into nearly a year. I focused on my students, on lesson plans, on parent conferences and science fairs, and all the small moments that made teaching meaningful. Outwardly, everything looked the same. Inwardly, it did not. Every now and then, I would see Ethan's name in a newspaper headline or on a television screen somewhere. Blackwood Capital had changed. Not overnight, not dramatically, but gradually. Community partnerships expanded. Local leaders gained larger roles in redevelopment projects. Programs appeared that prioritized families instead of profits alone. Reporters called it a strategic shift. Investors called it a long-term adjustment. I remembered a conversation on a rainy night and wondered if the change had another name. One snowy afternoon in late December, Lily walked into my classroom carrying a newspaper. "You need to see this." I looked up from grading papers. The article featured a photograph of Ethan standing beside community leaders, teachers, and neighborhood volunteers. There was no spotlight on him. No oversized company logo. No grand speech. Just people working together. The headline described a new initiative focused on education and affordable family resources. I read the article twice, then set it aside. Something tightened in my chest. Not regret exactly. Something more complicated. That evening, my phone buzzed with a message from an unfamiliar number. "Merry Christmas, Miss Carter. The rabbit had 3 birthday parties this year. Emily." I laughed out loud. Then another message arrived. "He misses you." I stared at the screen for a long time before putting the phone away. New Year's came and went. January became February. Then one bright March morning, the school principal asked me to attend a district event celebrating community education programs. Normally, I would have declined. This time, I agreed. The auditorium buzzed with conversation. Teachers filled rows of seats. Local officials mingled near the stage. I was scanning the program when the room suddenly grew quieter. Not silent, just different. The kind of shift that happens when someone important enters. I looked up. Ethan had just walked through the doors. My heart immediately forgot how to behave. He looked older somehow. Not physically. Wiser perhaps. More grounded. His eyes moved across the crowd until they found me. For a second, neither of us moved. Then he started walking in my direction. The noise around us faded. My pulse quickened with every step he took. When he finally stopped in front of me, there was no expensive gift. No proposal. No grand gesture. Just Ethan. Hello, Grace. His voice sounded exactly the same. Familiar enough to ache. I smiled despite myself. Hello, Ethan. For a moment, he simply looked at me. Then he said the words I never expected. You were right. I blinked. About what? A small smile appeared. About almost everything. And for the first time in nearly a year, hope returned. There are moments that change your life loudly. And then there are moments that change it with a single sentence. Ethan and I stood near the back of the auditorium while people moved around us. Teachers found their seats. Officials reviewed notes. Conversations blended into a steady hum. Yet somehow it felt as if we were standing alone. You were right about almost everything? I asked. Ethan smiled. That sounds worse when repeated out loud. I laughed softly. The familiar warmth returned immediately. Not because a year had disappeared, because some connection survived distance. What changed? I asked. Ethan looked toward the stage for a moment before answering. I stopped asking how much something was worth. His voice remained calm, and started asking who it affected. I thought about the articles, the new programs, the changes people had talked about for months. That is a difficult lesson. It took a difficult teacher. I shook my head. I was never your teacher. Grace. His eyes met mine. You were the first person who expected nothing from me. The honesty in his voice made my chest tighten. Before I could answer, a familiar voice interrupted. There you are. Emily appeared between us like a burst of sunlight. She was taller now, more confident. The stuffed rabbit was nowhere in sight, which somehow felt like proof that time had truly passed. She hugged me first, then rolled her eyes dramatically at her brother. Did he make this awkward? I laughed. Ethan looked offended. I'm standing right here. Exactly. Emily grinned. That is why I asked. The three of us spent the next hour together. Talking, laughing, remembering. Nothing grand happened. No dramatic declarations. No audience. No spectacle. Just something far more valuable. Peace. When the event ended, sunlight spilled across the school courtyard outside. Spring had finally arrived. Children played on the nearby field. Their laughter carried through the warm afternoon air. Ethan and I walked slowly toward the parking lot, while Emily raced ahead to join a group of volunteers. She is happy, I said. Ethan watched his sister for a moment. She is. Then he looked at me. So am I. My heart skipped. Not because of the words. Because of the certainty behind them. We stopped beside my car. The same old car. The same teacher. The same life I had before all of this began. Yet somehow everything felt different. Ethan reached into his jacket pocket. I immediately narrowed my eyes. If that is another envelope, I am leaving. He laughed. A real laugh. No envelope. Instead, he handed me a small folded piece of paper. I opened it carefully. Inside was a photograph. Emily stood in the center, smiling. Ethan stood beside her, and there was one empty space next to them. On the back, a handwritten note read, "Some families are chosen." I looked up. Ethan's expression was gentle, hopeful, honest. For the first time, there were no walls between our worlds. No billion-dollar companies. No headlines. No expectations. Just two people standing beneath a bright spring sky. I came back as the man you believed I could become, he said quietly. Tears filled my eyes before I could stop them. Then I smiled. Because the strange thing about hearts is that they are never stolen. They are given, one choice at a time. And somewhere between a rainy day, a frightened little girl, and a year of learning how to become better people, we had both finally found our way home.